Hello and welcome to a book review of Charlie Jane Anders' All the Birds in the Sky. This is a science fiction fantasy that was published in 2016 and a Nebula Award winner, which is how I came across it. It was one of half a dozen books that I have not been able to find in the wild, and I have not been fortunate enough to have been sent to me. And I had a couple Audible credits, so I was like, you know what? Let's see if I can get through any of these via Audible. And this one I actually found for free through Recorded Books. And so if you would like to listen to this after my review, you can do so for free. I'm not sure if you need an Audible membership or not in order to get it for free, but it was free for me. I have to say this is very YA heavy. It is considered a novel, science fantasy, and that is for a couple of reasons. Because the two main characters, Patricia and Lawrence, Patricia is a naturalist witch and Lawrence is a genius scientific inventor. And the book follows them from adolescence into adulthood. And it's actually broken up into 4 books. So the first book within All the Birds in the Sky is their childhood, so when they're young children, like in elementary school age. Then the second book is them in middle school age. And the third and fourth books are them as they are adults. And the reason why I state that this is a YA novel is because if I had found this book when I was a teenager and or a young college kid, I would have probably adored this book. Now, that's not to say it's not a good book. It's just that the level of writing and my engagement with the characters was very surface level, because it didn't click for me, versus where if I felt that I was still in that teenage mindset, it probably would have been much more impactful. Editing Bob here, what I'm trying to say is that if I was still an angsty teenager, I would definitely relate more to this book than I do now as an adult who has gone through and dealt with a lot of my past trauma. As someone who has put in the work in order to better understand myself and my shortcomings, as well as the relationships I had when I was younger, to where I no longer feel quite as angry about them as I did, and or resentful of them as I did. I didn't engage with the characters as much as I feel like myself in my teens would have appreciated them. So that's what I'm trying to convey. If you are still angsty AF, you might love them. You might love these characters. You might love this book. You might totally be like, stick it to the man or the women or whatever. But as someone who doesn't feel that way as often or as much or with the same visceralness as I did when I was younger, that's the point I'm trying to get here. As I mentioned before, this book was originally written in 2016, and as such there are a lot of modern elements in the books. For example, inferences to Instagram and Facebook and using your cell phone to take pictures. And while, you know, it is a contemporary work of science fantasy, I do feel like that both adds to the story and detracts from the story because of the fact that it's so current. I don't feel like it will age well, and I also don't feel like it'll lend itself to longevity due to the fact that this is probably the first review on YouTube. Actually, I know it's the first review in YouTube since it came out in 2016. I feel like that's very indicative as to how well the story is going to age. I actually also checked TikTok because, as I stated, I do feel like this is very much a YA novel and book talk is a very big thing. So I was hoping to see more on book talk about this book, and it's got, you know, half a dozen or so reviews there, but the earliest one I saw was in 2022. This is a book that is a nice story. I enjoyed listening to it, but it doesn't have any legs. Like, it is not impactful enough in order to continue beyond its initial release, unless I will say that this book does lend itself very well to if it gets picked up for a limited series and or a movie. If it gets picked up for either of those, a limited series or a movie, and considering some of the trash that Netflix has greenlit lately, I think that it would actually find a new audience and actually gain more traction in that way, kind of similar to The Hunger Games and also Divergent. Although, to be fair, The Hunger Games is getting a breath of fresh air breathed into it, and another new generation of people discovering it due to the fact that the songs and ballads of Birds of Snakes is coming out as a movie this year. So I don't believe that this book will be talked about in another decade unless it gets picked up as limited series or as a movie. And to be honest, after reading the book, or after enjoying the book experience, I do feel like it could lend itself very well to a script or several, depending on how the creators wanted to break it up. You follow Patricia in the first book as she discovers her powers, her being a witch who can talk to animals, and also you are introduced to Lawrence, who builds a 2-second time machine as a child, and his love affair of science and outer space, as well as an introduction into characters that are pertinent later on in the story. And it is very much, magic versus science versus... It's very much a story of magic versus science, and also how the two of them can coexist together, just not only in the world that Charlie Jane Anders has created, but also, together in, I guess, the genre. And there were just a couple of things that I found very interesting. I do have to state that while I would have probably enjoyed this book much more as a teenager, I will say that as someone who has not been a teenager for a very long time, I'm grateful that I'm not a teenager today, because with social media and how in tune everything is, I would have been even more miserable as a child and as a teen, due to the fact that there was some very graphic detailing of how modern bullying is. And as the kid that was too smart for the normal kids and too weird for the smart kids, I totally get the meet cute between the two main characters, Patricia and Lawrence. They're basically too special and unique in order to get along with regular kids, and thus are forced together coincidentally and establish this long relationship through the course of the book. I also feel quite a bit for Charlie Jane Anders, because I don't feel like as an author you'd be able to write with that much detail the bullying unless you yourself were also a victim of bullying as well. So to turn that into art, I feel like is very much a feather in Charlie Jane Anders' hat. I did find it interesting that the performer for the book did not know what MRSA was, and good for them for not knowing what a horrible, deadly disease is, but they pronounced it MRSA in the book, and I had to mentally picture that in order to understand what they were talking about, because I've literally never heard of anybody call it MRSA. That's like saying, oh, I lost 4 years of my life playing WOW. Nobody says that. Nobody refers to WoW as WOW. Like, that's just, some acronyms are so ubiquitous that you shouldn't you shouldn't spell it out that way, but use it as it's colloquially or more commonly used. I thought that was very interesting. I do thematically like creating a story between magic and science existing in a world or not existing in a world. And I thought that there are a lot of really interesting ideas that she had in this book. I will say that towards the third and the fourth books, there were times where I legitimately had to stop listening to the book, because if I heard aggrandizement one more time, I was going to scream. That is a common theme toward the end of the book, where Patricia has to not aggrandize herself, and the witch society keeps talking about aggrandizement, and it felt like that was her word of the day, and she liked it so much she like built the whole second half of the book around it, and it just annoyed the crap out of me. Like, it was painful, and I felt a little bit bad for the performer at that point, despite the fact I just talked about Myrsa having to say that word so many times. Like, there was whole paragraphs where it was repeated more than once. And it was just like, we get it. Please stop. Use the thesaurus. Figure something else out. I know that that's what they're calling it, but there are other words, or there was ways to explain what it was better, not only to the audience, but also to Patricia, to where it would have, I think, benefited the character and the story more, and also the reader, because they didn't have to keep hearing the word aggrandizement. So, hello again. I also briefly wanted to mention that there is a sex scene in this book that actually made me laugh out loud, just because of the fact that it was written in a way that I have never read before, as someone who has read a few spicy books. It was interesting in that it was extremely detailed, but not details most people normally give when they're writing a sexy scene. It was the most unsexy sexy time I have ever read in my life, just because of the level detail that was given was not normally what is usually used when you're writing a sexy scene. And so it was neither sexy or heartwarming. It wasn't actually like a love scene either. It was, I don't know, it's like, the way I can describe it, in which actually made me laugh, is if like two people who film themselves having sex for the first time, and they realize that, oh, that's nothing like corn at all. That is not cute. That's kind of what it was. But it was supposed to be like this amazing, endearing moment between characters, and I just could not stop laughing for like a solid couple of minutes, because I was just like, okay, that's a thing that I just listened to. Cool. And I had to listen to it twice, because I did listen to this book twice, so just giving you a heads up. I'm not going to tell you where it is in the book, I'm not going to tell you who it's between, but it is there, and it is an experience. Not to say, like, I did enjoy the book. I did listen to it twice, because whenever I do these book reviews via an auditory experience, I do like to listen to it twice to make sure I didn't miss anything, and also to make sure that I got the full context of the story in order to hopefully give you a decent review. You know, I know the majority of my audience is older male, so I'm not sure you would enjoy it. Like I said, it is very YA. But you might be interested. It is very intersectional. Again, it's very modern, very contemporary, and it is leftist leaning. So if those are not your jam, maybe pass. But I do know that I actually will be reading some of the works from this year that did not win the Nebula Award, that were up against All the Birds in the Sky by Charlie Jane Anders. Due to the fact that another book in the series won the Nebula Award in later years. I know that N.K. Jemisin is one of those. I will definitely be giving you my opinion if maybe I feel like All the Birds in the Sky should have won over those other ones, because I will be reading them. But it's definitely worth a free listen, in my opinion. So if you have an Audible subscription, or even if you don't, maybe you can still get this book for free. Again, I did get it through Audible. I will put a link down below if you're interested. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video. Until then, bye!